Tonight, we delve into a landmark Supreme Court decision that has sent ripples through the very foundation of American federalism. This ruling is not just another legal headline, it's a pivotal moment that redefines the delicate balance of power between the president and the states, a relationship that has shaped our nation since its founding. For generations, the question of who holds ultimate authority in times of domestic crisis has been fiercely debated. The Supreme Court's latest decision has brought this debate to the forefront, clarifying the boundaries between federal oversight and state autonomy in a way that will resonate for years to come. Just weeks ago, National Guard members, our neighbors, friends, and family, found themselves at the heart of a constitutional standoff. The Trump administration's decision to place these citizen soldiers under federal command for domestic law enforcement duties sparked immediate controversy. Many questioned whether the president had the legal right to override state authority and deploy the Guard for policing American streets, raising concerns about the potential for federal overreach and the erosion of local control. This unprecedented move was met with swift and fierce resistance from governors in states like Illinois and California. These leaders argued passionately that the federal government was overstepping its constitutional bounds, igniting a high-stakes legal battle that quickly captured the nation's attention. Protesters rallied outside government buildings, waving state flags and demanding that their voices and their rights be respected. The question at the heart of the case was clear: where does federal authority end and where does state sovereignty begin? In a historic 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled in Trump versus Illinois that the president lacked the authority to federalize the National Guard for domestic policing without the explicit consent of state governments. The majority opinion emphasized the importance of checks and balances, affirming that states retain significant powers under the Constitution, especially when it comes to the deployment of their own military forces within their borders. This ruling not only checked executive power, but also reaffirmed the foundational principle of states' rights. The decision had immediate and far-reaching consequences. Federal takeovers of state National Guard units were halted across the country. Leaders like Governor Newsom hailed the ruling as a major victory for state control and the rule of law, celebrating alongside supporters and lawmakers who saw the decision as a restoration of the balance intended by the nation's founders. The ruling sent a clear message: state governments have a vital role in safeguarding the rights and liberties of their citizens. As a result, National Guard service members returned home, resuming their roles as citizen soldiers under the command of their state leaders. Their homecomings were marked by scenes of relief and celebration, symbolizing a renewed commitment to state sovereignty and the enduring strength of American democracy. This Supreme Court decision marks not just a legal turning point, but the beginning of a new era, one in which the balance of power between Washington and the states is once again at the center of our national story. To understand this pivotal case, we need to look back to the turbulent summer of mid-2025, a time when the nation was gripped by widespread protests and civil unrest. Tensions were high in cities across the country, and the eyes of the nation turned to Illinois, where events would soon spark a constitutional showdown. In response to escalating violence and chaos, the Trump administration made a controversial move. It invoked emergency powers and took direct command of the Illinois National Guard, deploying troops to enforce federal law on the streets of Chicago and beyond. This marked a rare and dramatic assertion of federal authority over a state's military resources. Illinois' governor immediately pushed back, calling the federal intervention unconstitutional. He cited the Posse Comitatus Act, a law designed to limit the use of military forces in domestic law enforcement, and argued that the president had overstepped his legal bounds. The governor insisted that the National Guard should remain under state control unless Congress explicitly authorized federalization. The legal battle escalated rapidly. Lawyers for both sides clashed in courtrooms and on national television, debating the limits of presidential emergency powers versus the rights of states to govern their own affairs. Protesters gathered outside courthouses, demanding answers and accountability. The Trump administration defended its actions, claiming that the president possesses inherent executive authority to maintain national order during times of crisis. Officials argued that extraordinary circumstances required swift and decisive action, even if it meant overriding state objections. Meanwhile, Illinois and a coalition of allied states warned that allowing the president to unilaterally seize control of state National Guard units would set a dangerous precedent. They argued it would undermine the balance of power between federal and state governments and erode the autonomy of governors to protect their own citizens. The stakes were high. Governors across the country expressed alarm, fearing that if they lost control over their guard units, their ability to respond to natural disasters, public health emergencies, and local crises would be severely compromised. The case quickly became a flashpoint in the ongoing debate over federalism in America. At the heart of the controversy was a fundamental question: who truly commands the National Guard during domestic crises, the president or the governors? The answer would have far-reaching implications for the future of American democracy and the delicate balance of power. With the nation watching closely, the Supreme Court prepared to weigh in, setting the stage for a landmark decision that would shape the relationship between federal and state power for years to come. On a December morning, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict. The president had overstepped by federalizing the Illinois Guard without congressional approval. The 6-3 majority, crossing ideological lines, found that the law requires strict limits on federal use of state forces for domestic policing. The court's opinion emphasized that state control of the Guard is a cornerstone of federalism, not to be overridden by executive decree. State leaders hailed the decision as a victory for constitutional order. The dissent warned that the ruling could limit the president's ability to respond to national crises. The court's split revealed deep divisions over the scope of presidential power. Chief Justice Roberts' majority opinion traced the Guard's history and stressed that federalization is only allowed under narrow congressionally defined circumstances. The court found that general civil unrest did not meet the legal threshold for federal intervention. The Posse o Comitatus Statutus, Authoritaritas Act, the justices wrote, is a vital safeguard separating military and civilian law enforcement. Allowing unilateral presidential action would turn the Guard into a federal police force, something the framers sought to prevent. The ruling reaffirmed that governors are constitutionally protected commanders-in-chief of their state forces. Even the president's powers, the court concluded, are subject to the rule of law and must be grounded in explicit legal authority. The dissenting justices warned that the decision could leave the federal government powerless in fast-moving crises. They argued the president needs broad authority to act in emergencies, even without explicit congressional approval. Waiting for state or legislative consent, they said, could cause dangerous delays in national emergencies. The dissent criticized the majority for judicial overreach and warned of future scenarios where federal inaction could threaten national security. The debate over federal versus state power, they concluded, is far from settled. The ruling immediately shifted power back to the states, giving governors stronger legal ground to resist federal control of their Guard units. Communities gained reassurance that local responders, not federal troops, would handle most emergencies, restoring trust in local authorities. For Guard members, the decision clarified their mission and chain of command. States now retain control over Guard budgets and deployment, allowing for better disaster planning and economic stability. Future presidents face a higher legal bar for using the Guard in domestic law enforcement, requiring congressional approval or proof of true insurrection. The decision encourages cooperation between federal and state leaders rather than unilateral action. In short, the court mandated a more balanced constitutional approach to domestic crises. Constitutional scholars call Trump versus Illinois a landmark for federalism. Dr. Evelyn Reed notes the decision halts decades of expanding presidential power, revitalizing the 10th Amendment and forcing cooperation between federal and state governments. She argues the ruling strengthens the nation's foundation by ensuring both federal and state powers remain intact. Mark Chen of the Cato Institute highlights the civil liberties at stake, emphasizing that the Posse Comitatus Act protects Americans from military policing. The decision brings clarity, reducing legal ambiguity and the risk of future constitutional crises. State and federal leaders now have clear rules for deploying the Guard. This stability, experts agree, is essential for democracy and public trust. For those on the ground, the ruling was more than just a headline. It was deeply personal, touching the lives of families, neighbors, and entire communities. Across Illinois and California, people gathered in living rooms, on city streets, and in local parks, listening intently as the news broke. The decision sent ripples of emotion through towns both large and small, sparking conversations about what it truly means to have a say in the forces that protect and serve you. Major Sarah Jenkins of the Illinois Guard described the relief of returning to state command, saying, "We serve our neighbors, not distant orders." For her and her fellow guardsmen, the shift meant a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. No longer were they just following directives from afar, they were once again part of the fabric of their own communities, able to respond to local needs with understanding and compassion. The pride in their voices was unmistakable, as was the gratitude from those they served. In California, Mayor David Ortiz welcomed his guard unit back, calling it a restoration of the community's safety net. He spoke at a city hall gathering, emphasizing how the Guard's local presence reassured residents and strengthened the bonds between citizens and those in uniform. The mayor's words echoed through the crowd, many of whom had family members in the Guard, and who now felt a renewed sense of security and pride in their city. Chicago organizer Maria Flores said the decision protected the right to peaceful protest and checked government overreach. She addressed a rally in Grant Park, where activists and everyday citizens gathered to celebrate the ruling. For many, the decision was not just about the Guard, it was about preserving the freedoms that define their city. Maria's words resonated with those who had long advocated for civil liberties, reminding everyone that democracy thrives when local voices are heard and respected. Citizens across Illinois and California expressed relief that their Guard units remained local, not federal enforcers. Parents hugged their children a little tighter, knowing that the people in uniform were friends, neighbors, and relatives, not strangers sent from far away. Community events took on new meaning, as residents welcomed the Guard home with open arms, grateful for the renewed sense of trust and partnership. A retired factory worker summed it up: "The Guard is made up of our sons and daughters. They belong to us." His words captured the sentiment of many who saw the decision as a return to common sense. In small towns and big cities alike, people reflected on the importance of local control and the comfort that comes from knowing those who serve are rooted in the same communities they protect. The court's decision, many felt, restored common sense and community trust. Town hall meetings buzzed with optimism, as neighbors discussed the future with renewed hope. Applause broke out at public gatherings, not just for the ruling but for the spirit of unity it inspired. People from all walks of life came together, recognizing that their voices had made a difference. For everyday Americans, it was a victory for local control and constitutional balance. The ruling reminded them that democracy is strongest when decisions are made close to home, by people who understand the unique needs and values of their communities. In the end, it was a moment of celebration, a reaffirmation that the power of the people and the bonds of community remain at the heart of the nation. Why does this Supreme Court case matter? Because it shapes who holds power over your community and your rights. The ruling affirms that state leaders, closer and more accountable to you, have real authority. It's a reminder that the Constitution is a living framework, not just history. Staying informed about decisions like Trump versus Illinois empowers you to engage, hold leaders accountable, and protect democracy. The debate over federal and state power will continue, and your voice matters in shaping that future. Thank you for watching, and for being an active part of our democracy.